Good morning, everybody. And thank you, Carol Kroll, for asking me to speak today. But quick show of hands, how many of you in the room are my CEO? Awesome, nobody. So let's talk about him. My CEO says that there's one thing that we're never allowed to say in a new business pitch, and that is that if somebody who spoke before us has said something that we were going to say, we can't say, Carol stole my thunder. We have to actually say what we were going to say because we believe in it and because we were going to say it for a reason. And what struck me, I'm fortunate I haven't been to a lot of the conference. I ended up arriving late last night, later than I thought. But when I look at the recaps, the inked recaps of the previous keynotes, when I listen to Jeff, I've seen and heard a lot of things that I'm going to actually say today. And my first thought was, ooh, maybe I shouldn't say them. And my second thought was my CEO's voice, that there's a reason that I was going to say them, and I'm still going to say them. And what's really heartening, though, is that this is maybe not as much an outsider perspective as maybe I expected, which I think is a really good thing. When I was asked to speak here, I was told at one point that I might be the least B2B speaker at the event, which since I've spent my almost entire career creating B2B content, I'm going to still try and take as a compliment, but I know where it was coming from, and I'm going to try to bring a little bit of an outsider perspective, but I'm also really happy that it's not just that, and that a lot of what I'm talking about are things that are being repeated already. So one of the things I did when I wanted to give a speech was I went and typed into search engine B2B inspirational quotes. And the first thing that came up was a guy with his head on the desk. Think about this. Look at the name of this article. It's 25 motivational quotes for B2B sales and marketing professionals. And to choose to inspire you, there's a guy with his head on the desk. And if you can read any of that, it basically says that it doesn't matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop. So the first inspirational quote is, go slow. And this really raises for me one of the issues here, which is that there is a perception issue still that B2B is boring. And the interesting thing is that the people who most have this perception are B2B marketers. There's this feeling, and there are reasons for it, but there is this belief and feeling that what you do somehow is inherently boring, and that the principles of great storytelling and human storytelling somehow don't apply to B2B marketers. We have, I would say at this point, Digitas, about close to probably half of our clients are B2B clients, and I hear this all the time. So we were in a pitch recently for an enterprise technology company, and I had been giving some of my thoughts, as I'm giving today, on the power of great storytelling. And the CMO looked at me at a certain point, and again, I get this in almost every B2B business pitch that we do, and said, I understand why that's really cool when Pepsi does it. I understand why it's cool when Red Bull does it. I understand why it's cool when BMW does it. I don't understand what stories we have to tell that are worthy of people's time in that way. And this was a company, as I reminded her, that among other things had cloud software that powered has cloud software that powers many of the machines in emergency rooms in hospitals around the world. And I said, what if I send Morgan Spurlock and a team of documentarians to emergency rooms around the world and follow the nurses who are working the late shift at those emergency rooms to talk about how the technology that's available to them now is saving lives every day. And the CMO looked and she said, I literally have the hairs on my arms raised. I didn't think we had stories to tell that are that worthy of that time. And that goes back to, and I'll say it again here, what Jeff just said, it's all about knowing your why. It's about moving beyond products and benefits and attributes and telling the stories of the ways in which you change people's lives every day. I'm going to show you two quick videos, and then we can talk about how you'd rather spend a minute of your life.
With a conventional belt CVT, a lot of customers don't like that rubber band feel. If you've ever driven a snowmobile, you know that the engine speed goes up significantly, and then the snowmobile catches up in speed to the engine. With Veriglide, we're able to eliminate that feeling and make the transmission on the vehicle feel very much like a conventional transmission, which to our consumers is extremely important.
One of the unique characteristics of Veriglide is the capability to do rapid mode shifts. we can change the speed ratio of air light in 0.2 seconds from full underdrive to full overdrive. This gives us tremendous flexibility in developing unique calibrations depending on the application requirements. So we can develop sports settings or comfort settings. Unlike conventional systems where mode shifts can take 1 to 2 seconds, Light can perform almost instantaneous mode shifts because of the fact that we can change the speed ratio of the system so quickly.
I've had my ups and downs, my fair share of bumpy roads and heavy winds. That's what made me what I am today. Now I stand here before you. What you see is a body crafted to perfection, a pair of legs engineered to defy the laws of physics, and a mindset to master the most epic of splits.
Maya Angelou, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, people will never forget how you made them feel. Apologies to Variglide, and if anyone from Variglide is in the room, you can come up and take a swing at me after this. It's not an insult to what Variglide's doing, but if you look at what Volvo Trucks has done, and they followed this up with some pretty cool things as well. If you haven't seen it, I'd look up the 4-year-old girl driving the remote-controlled, full-size Volvo truck through an obstacle course. Talk about, if you're going to show product benefits, that's the way to show them. It's great storytelling. And by the way, the thing about it is that if you go look at that video and then you go to the Volvo Truck site, all of the things that were in the Variglide video, the things that matter to people who actually have to make these purchase decisions are there. It's just a matter of what front door you came into that information through, and that front door really matters. So the conventional wisdom, as I said, is that B2B is boring, and there's a reason for that, of course, and again, we work with a lot of B2B marketers. A lot of times the information has to obviously be more factually correct in a lot of ways than other information that we're getting out there. It's often technically complex. Often you have to face legal and regulatory hurdles, and the content has to go through a lot of processes and steps before it's even allowed to be created and released. On top of that, and I say this as somebody who was a B2B journalist for a lot of my career, there's this knowledge, unlike consumer marketers or consumer journalists, that your audience isn't necessarily looking to you always as the expert. Your audience might know as much or more about what you're talking about than you do. But there's another truth here, and there's a truth that we do forget, which is that when we use words a lot of times like customer and customer journey, when we use words like consumer, when we use words, you know, whatever they might be, that are kind of trade language, we forget that there are human beings at the end of what we're doing, that there are moms and dads and lovers and friends and kids, and these are people who can be appealed to in the same way that other people can. Now, one of the fears or dangers that I have when I talk about storytelling is that sounds like a squishy word. You know, if you go storytelling and then you talk about ROI, and I can talk about ROI in depth because one of the things, it's funny, I wrote a piece for Fast Company a few years ago called The 10 Commandments of Content. Number 1, which you heard this morning, was find your why. Number 10 was don't do it because it's cool, do it because it works. And that's this idea that obviously you have to hold every dollar you spend in content marketing as accountable as every other dollar you spend. But when we talk storytelling, as much as that can sound like a squishy word, there's actually brain science behind this. There's a fantastic book called The Storytelling Animal, which is not about marketing or business, but it is about humans. And one of the things that becomes really clear in there is that we often, as marketers, try to appeal to the rational brain, but in fact, it's the story side of the brain and evolution that has evolved to make sense of the world, that has evolved and is responsible for things like decision-making and loyalty. And in fact, your rational brain is just there to justify the decisions that your storytelling brain has already made. So there's other real ROI measures behind this, but this is really just a reminder that this is actually the fastest way to human hearts and minds is through storytelling. It's literally how we've evolved as people, and it really is the right way to approach people. So again, we can beat this one to death, but start with why is really this idea of elevating beyond what your product does, beyond what its attributes are, and really back into just ask yourself, what is the role it plays in people's lives? And we had a really interesting conversation a few years back. I was working with Johnson & Johnson, both a consumer and a trade marketer. But on the consumer side, we were literally at lunch with the creator of CSI franchise. And he asked my J&J client about what are some of the brands you make, and she named them. And he said, what's a Band-Aid? And she said, what do you mean, what's a Band-Aid? You know what a Band-Aid is? And he said, no, if I just landed in a spaceship from Mars and I didn't know what a Band-Aid was, what's a Band-Aid? And she said, a Band-Aid is an adhesive bandage for minor wounds. And he said, no, it's not. It's the courage to try again. And told the story of falling off a bicycle as a boy and running inside crying, and his mother drying it, cleaning putting the Band-Aid on, and him having that courage to get back up and go out there again. And which story would you rather hear and be told, about the adhesive bandage for the minor wound or the courage to try again? These principles of great storytelling apply, and they're applied because they're driven by real human insights. And that's as important for what you do as it is for any consumer brand. So I'm going to talk about 5 principles today, which are listed here. So I won't read them to you right now, but I will start to go through them one at a time. The first is strive for simplicity. And I thought this was a really cool example of print ads. I'm going to show you a fair amount of video, but I'm not forgetting the rest of the ecosystem. I just think it's a more engaging way to obviously stand in front of you all. But this really cool John Deere campaign, again, what's really interesting is if you could read the small type, and if you needed to read the small type, if you were purchasing any of these products, the small type goes into quite a bit of detail about the technical specs of the products and why they're superior and what they've done to evolve. But you don't need it. You need to look at the photo and you understand what they're saying. You understand what they're saying about how these are an extension of what humans can do. You can understand how it's inspired by humans to really make sense in a simple way and how we work. You understand that it's about that bringing together of innovation, technology, and humans to do something better. And a really powerful, simple graphic. You need to just look at that image. And then again, when you need to go deeper, that information is there as well. Engage emotion to engage understanding. This is coming through in a lot of what we're seeing. I've already teared up a couple of times this morning. Again, when you think about Microsoft and their why, if you've seen the longer version, for example, among the things that Jeff showed of the woman who hears for the first time and begins crying, and you can see just the look on her face when she can hear, makes you understand if you work at Microsoft and if you develop technology, why you do what you do. And this morning with obviously Canines for Warriors, this is this real thing that this is the heart of how you go to people and the stories you tell them. So if you think about a category that should be fairly boring, Vistaprint might be one that came to mind. They make, among other things, business cards, but they also do this.
Time is moving at the speed of light. The engine's cold, the fire's bright. There's miles and miles to go tonight. Hold on tight. There are things we cannot know.
Are we back? Oh, yay. Woo! So, for those who may not have heard, the target here could have been SBOs, small business owners, or the target could be a dad. And I don't know how many of you agree, but I'd like to quit my job now and go work for a bakery. Empathy is the next thing, as well as human insight. I'm going to try to forward. I'm not sure if this is going to start the video right away. If it does, I may stop it. Oh, it doesn't. Good. So we created a program recently in market, or newly in market, called Psychology of Change for American Express. And here again, if you think about small business owners, American Express has long had a content portal that is about making sure that small business owners have the tools they need to succeed. But what was missing was that we weren't necessarily giving them the confidence to succeed. And when you talk about building content out of simple human insights, one of the things we found in doing a lot of our research into this target was that a lot of small business owners actually get very frozen in place on decision making. They feel like too much of it comes down to them. A lot of times, if they were the dreamer who came up with an idea that became a company, they weren't necessarily the business person. They don't have that confidence in their own decision making. They feel like it all can come down to them too often. And so we decided that we had to not just give these business owners the practical tools they needed to succeed, but the confidence. And it looks something like this.
Mark, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
My name is Henrik Werlin. I'm the co-founder of Bach & Co., where we send treats and toys to dogs across the country to try to make them even happier.
The company's been in the family for 63 years, so I'm hoping to keep that tradition going.
No matter how challenging life and work can get, your team is always looking to you.
I find it hard to be upset, to be tired, to be sick, to be down, because I'm like, everyone's relying on me and they're looking to me for leadership.
So we just have one more little special thing I wanted to share with you. If you don't mind just kind of stepping up. One last little thing.
Okay.
I want to just walk through here and follow the light. Cue video one.
Hi, Jonathan. Welcome. He's one of the most inspiring, hardworking, and creative young people that I know.
And it has successfully converted me to now believe that you can actually change the world one person at a time.
He seems to be 1, 2, 3 years ahead of where we're at right now. One of the things I've learned from Henrik is thinking much bigger, thinking further ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you for being a mentor. That's so incredibly special.
I'm the youngest one at the company by 25, 30 years. I've tried to give Grado a voice.
It's kind of nice, and I guess this is from a father and son perspective, you know, that there are things your son knows that you don't know.
It's about commitment. It's about who you are going through life with.
It's better than any job I could have kind of really hoped for. It's almost like I made up this fantasy world.
Usually only a handful of people really impact your life, and he's certainly been one of those in my life.
It's the people, it's the space, it's the products we do, and the mission we are on. That's what binds it all together.
What I never sign off is I'm impressed by you. I respect everything you've done. I want to do everything I can to help.
The leader doesn't always get a pat on the back, but you deserve one every day.
It's hard to know when you're doing a good job. So it's nice to know I'm doing something right. So that really did mean a lot. Thank you.
So the cool thing here was that there was this really nice, what we call hero video that was the front door to this program. But in fact, that again was just the front door. So when you go into this, if you're an open forum member and you're going into this set of tools, you actually will then find an interactive quiz that helps you identify what kind of leader you are, that then points you to the guidebooks on how you can become a better leader. This was developed with a social psychologist. There's a podcast. There are multiple elements of this, and for those that want and need to, they can go really deep on this. So there is a content ecosystem, and I think that's a really important part of it, is none of these things exist in and of themselves, but they all are still an amazingly human way to get into the storytelling. Data are humans in disguise is a saying that we make at Digitas a lot, and we really mean it, because again, when you mine that data, you find incredible insights that allow you to do great things and not get so caught up in how what you're doing is so complex technically that you forget who's on the other end of it and what that can look like. So take a look at this.
To me, symphonology is this joining of humans and computers. It's business articles run through my AI, Transpose, then given to a human composer, and then given to rare volume, and then it will be performed at the Louvre, which I think is the first time that's ever been done. Accenture Strategy reached out to me, and they wanted to see if I could make a musical piece based on business articles. They wanted to then give that piece to a composer who was going to make a symphony out of it.
So I'm going to stop that just because it's a longish video and we're running a little tight on time. But a really cool program in which Accenture, as you saw, began to see, took all of these business articles and terms and things that were happening out there, transformed them into music, and then had that music performed at the Louvre as a way of introducing what it can do in taking complex information, breaking it down, making it human, and then turning that into solutions. And again, just a really wonderful thing. Speak English, at least in English-speaking countries. Obviously, speak the language of other countries where you don't, but don't speak trade. And again, I think this goes to this idea that no matter how complex what you do is, and no matter how much you may need at a certain point to speak in the language of your buyer, first and foremost, do great storytelling. GE, I think, is among the greatest B2B marketers out there, and they do this in, as you probably are aware, in almost any of their communications at this point. And what they've discovered was, and realized a while back, was we're not just a B2B marketer, we also are an employer, we also are a publicly held company, we also are a potential employer of people, and we need to tell that story of what we do in innovation and break down what we do from the very complex to the very human.
Every breakthrough is driven by this very compelling human drama. We're interested in getting great storytellers to work with us to make a great drama out of our exploration of each of these important issues.
We can create things that seem like fiction.
Their mysteries, their adventures, their challenges, and they're desperately important.
That was really just one of many things that GE did, but I think what's amazing there again is you think about a company that if you just kind of went into, here's what GE is, here's what they do, the old view of them as this industrial manufacturing company, and then you actually said that here's a company that can get people like Ron Howard and Brett Ratner and Paul Giamatti to want to tell the story about how their innovations are changing lives, and you begin to realize that nobody out there is boring. One of the quick things, I've showed you a lot of expensive video-based things, as I said, but it does not have to be expensive to be sexy. First of all, this means that anything you do in any platform can still have these same principles of storytelling behind it. It also means that there are ways of doing content that are much more accessible than a lot of brands realize, no matter what your budget is. We actually, and I'm not going to make this at all a pitch, it's just a pretty cool thing. Snacktory is a very badly named product that I did not name, that Digitas has, but it's probably the most popular thing we have. And what's really interesting is, in some ways, it's the least sexy of the things that we do as a content team, and yet in every new business pitch to a B2B marketer, a financial marketer, or a healthcare marketer in particular that I've been involved with in the last year, it's the thing that CMOs most respond to, and usually what they say, even if they haven't hired us yet, is, I need you to build me that yesterday. What Snacktory does is take existing content assets that brands have already invested in. And again, let's go back to what I was saying earlier, and you know this, that a lot of the content that B2B marketers create takes a lot of time, needs a lot of, again, complexity that goes into it. You need an expertise in developing it. It needs to be fact-checked, clear these regulatory hurdles, legal hurdles. And a lot of times people are making these investments, and this probably resonates with people here, and then nobody's looking at your content. And that investment is then seen as a waste of time. To me, as someone who evangelizes the power of storytelling content, the worst thing in the world is when brands think content doesn't work. And usually, instead of then agreeing with them that maybe content doesn't work for them, it's like, what do we dig in and find out? Why isn't your content working? Because again, a lot of the content I showed may have been kind of upper funnel, or, again, I'm a much bigger believer in that consumer decision journey, but more, on the kind of front end of that. But in fact, the question isn't what's content good at. The question is, what are you trying to achieve as a marketer? And then what kind of content should you create? How should you distribute it? And how do you use content to enforce those goals? So when we looked at this challenge that we have with a lot of marketers of, I've already spent, in some cases, millions of dollars developing content that nobody's looking at, this is one of the answers that we have. And essentially what the Snacktory does is transform existing pieces of content into more shareable, snackable, engageable formats to unlock incremental value from the investments that marketers have already made. In this case, this was the, on the left there, or your left, was a very text-heavy, long white paper that was turned into an article that was getting no views at all, pretty much. And what we did was turn it into a series of assets that, I'm not gonna play these right now, but everything from those two middle pieces are both short animated videos. One's a cinematograph, one's an animated infographic. The other one, as you see, is an infographic. So Snacktory can turn things into infographics, cinemagraphs, podcasts. We're even doing VR work now. This is a VR project that we recently developed for, I can't say what the cost was, but I would say it's probably 1/50th of what you think it would cost to do VR. It's really 360. It's more of a 360 video experience, to be honest, although it can be looked at in VR environments as well. And it's really an infographic brought to life. But this is just a way of saying that despite having shown you a lot of the big sexy, not a lot of us can afford to do a series on National Geographic Channel with Ron Howard, but it doesn't mean you can't afford to make content and tell stories that are worthy of people's time. So hope I didn't bore you, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Thank you for having me.